April 28th, 1945. A muddy field outside Gotha, Germany. The world has shrunk to the smell of rain, damp wool, and fear. For 19-year-old Flakhelferin Ilse Schmidt, the horizon is no longer a canvas for spotting Allied bombers, but a gray, smeared line just beyond the muzzle of an American M3 submachine gun. The air, once torn by the shriek of 88mm anti-aircraft cannons, is now eerily quiet, punctuated only by the squelch of boots and mud and the low, guttural idling of a Sherman tank 50 yards away. Its cannon seems to stare directly at her, a single, unblinking eye of cold steel. Her own hands, raw and chapped from hauling ammunition crates, feel unnervingly empty. The KR-98K rifle she was issued 2 weeks ago lies in a growing pile with dozens of others, a testament to the futility of their final stand. You are there, in that line of women and teenage boys, the last dregs of the Third Reich's defense. You can feel the bone-deep chill that has nothing to do with the persistent drizzle. It's the cold of absolute uncertainty. Beside Ilse, Gretel, a woman of 25 whose face has been sharpened to a point by cynicism and hunger, mutters under her breath, "So this is it, the great twilight of the gods, a field of mud and Yankees chewing gum." Her voice is brittle, a whisper of defiance that no one but Ilse can hear. The American soldiers, men of the U.S. Ninth Army, move with an exhausted efficiency. They don't shout, they don't gloat. Their movements are wary, practiced, almost bored. This is a routine for them now, the processing of a collapsed nation. An American sergeant with a square jaw and tired eyes walks down the line, his gaze sweeping over them. He stops for a moment, his eyes lingering on the mix of Luftwaffe Helferin in uniforms and Hitler-Youth armbands. He shakes his head slightly, a gesture not of pity, but of sheer bewilderment. He says something to a younger private, who nods and starts gesturing with his rifle. "Aufstehen, raus, move it." The English words are sharp, functional. The command needs no translation. The group is herded towards a line of canvas-covered GMC trucks, the engines rumbling, spewing blue-gray exhaust into the damp air. The movement is sluggish, a shuffling of broken boots and clogs. Every face is a mask of pale exhaustion, smudged with dirt and streaked with rain. For weeks, their diet had been watery turnip soup and bread made of sawdust and flour. The hunger is a hollow ache in the pit of the stomach, a constant companion that has eroded everything but the most basic instinct to survive. As they are pushed toward the trucks, Ilse risks a glance back at their flak position. The big 88mm gun sits askew, its barrel pointing uselessly at the sky. The sandbags around it are torn and spilling their contents like entrails. It looks like a dead thing, a relic from an era that ended only hours ago. The propaganda posters, the rousing speeches of the Gauleiter, the promises of wonder weapons and final victory, it all seems like a fever dream now. The reality is this: the greasy sheen of rain on an American helmet, the smell of diesel, the clank of the truck's tailgate being dropped. They are herded up into the back, crammed shoulder to shoulder. The canvas slab is pulled down, plunging them into a swaying, jolting twilight. The truck lurches forward. No one knows where they are going. The stories they were told, the propaganda films they were shown, flicker in the darkness of their minds. Stories of brutal American soldiers, of vengeful barbarians from across the sea. Every jolt of the truck is a lurch closer to an unknown, terrifying fate. Gretel's voice, low and venomous, cuts through the gloom. "They'll probably put us in a camp and starve us, or worse." For Ilse, huddled against the vibrating wall of the truck, the gnawing in her belly is now indistinguishable from the cold dread coiling in her gut. The journey ends as it began, in mud. The trucks halt in a vast, churned field on the outskirts of a town whose name they do not know. The canvas flaks are thrown open, and the weak afternoon light is blinding. The order comes again, harsh and impatient. Out. Everybody out. They stumble down from the trucks, their legs stiff, their eyes struggling to adjust. What they see is a vision of utter defeat. As far as the eye can see, the landscape is dotted with figures in field gray, thousands upon thousands of them. A city of prisoners, sprawling across the hillsides, enclosed by rudimentary barbed wire fences and watched over by towers hastily constructed from raw timber. This is a Rheinwiesenlager, one of the massive transient camps built by the Allies to contain the tidal wave of surrendering German forces. Private First Class Dale Miller, a lanky 20-year-old from Ohio, watches the new arrivals with a practiced eye. He's part of the 504th Military Police Battalion, and for the past month, his life has been an unending cycle of processing, guarding, and counting. He had imagined the end of the war would be a grand, heroic battle. Instead, it is this, a logistical nightmare of biblical proportions. He stands near a processing table, his M1 Garand slung over his shoulder, watching the German women being separated from the men and boys. They are a sorry sight. Some look defiant, others terrified, but most just look empty, their eyes vacant sockets in grimy faces. His sergeant, a barrel-chested man named Davies, lights a cigarette, shielding the flame from the wind. Another batch, Davies grunts, exhaling a plume of smoke. Where the hell are we supposed to put them all? Ilsa and Gretel are pushed into a separate, smaller enclosure within the larger camp, an area designated for female personnel. It's nothing more than a rectangle of mud defined by a single strand of wire. There are no tents, no barracks, no shelter from the persistent drizzle that has now started again. A few hundred other women are already there, huddled together in small groups for warmth, their light gray Luftwaffe coats and dark blue BDM jackets soaked through. The air is thick with the smell of wet earth, unwashed bodies, and despair. There is no privacy, no dignity, just the wire, the mud, and the watchful eyes of the American guards in their distant towers. For hours, they simply exist. The cold seeps into their bones. The gnawing hunger becomes a throbbing physical pain. They watch as more trucks arrive, disgorging more and more defeated soldiers into the main camp. The sheer scale of it is crushing. The entire Wehrmacht, it seems, is being poured into these muddy fields. As dusk begins to settle, casting a purplish gloom over the landscape, a new sound cuts through the air, a jeep bouncing across the ruts, its headlights cutting yellow swaths through the twilight. It pulls up near the gate to their enclosure. 2 GIs jump out of the back and begin unloading wooden crates. A murmur ripples through the huddled women. Food. The word is a thought, a prayer, a desperate hope. The guards open the gate, and the GIs carry the crates inside, dropping them with a heavy thud in the center of the enclosure. Sergeant Davies follows them in, his face impassive. "All right, line up," he says, his voice flat. No pushing. The women surge forward, a ragged, desperate wave, before the sharp bark of his voice and the sight of the guards' rifles brings them to a hesitant, shuffling halt. They form a line, their eyes fixed on the crates. The GIs are prying them open with bayonets. The screech of nails being pulled from wood is the most beautiful sound Ilsa has ever heard. Private Miller is one of the men tasked with distribution. He pulls out the contents, small olive-drab cardboard boxes, K-rations. He works methodically, his face a mask of concentration, handing one box to each woman as she passes. He avoids their eyes, just as they avoid his. It's an anonymous, mechanical transaction. When Ilsa reaches the front, a box is thrust into her hands. It feels impossibly light, yet solid. She clutches it like a holy relic and scurries back to her spot beside Gretel. They sit in the mud, turning the boxes over in their hands. Inside, among a packet of biscuits and a fruit bar, is a small flat can. The label is in English. There is a picture of what looks like meat. Gretel squints at the can, her expression a mixture of suspicion and contempt. "What is this?" she whispers, her voice raspy. "They wouldn't give us real meat. It's a trick. It's probably poisoned." The small, tin-plated steel can sits in Ilsa's palm, cold and heavy. The printed words are alien. Corned beef. She traces the letters with a filthy finger. Below the text is a stylized drawing of a bull's head, looking regal and strong. It is an image from another world, a world of plenty, of fat cattle and full larders. Here, in this muddy pen, it seems like a cruel joke. Around them, the other women are examining their own rations with the same mixture of desperate hope and ingrained suspicion. A few of the younger ones, barely 16, tear into the biscuit packets, their hunger overriding any caution. But the older women, the ones who have seen and heard more, hesitate. They stare at the cans of meat, their faces tight with distrust. Gretel holds her can as if it were a live grenade. "Don't be a fool, Ilsa," she hisses, her eyes darting towards the American guards, who are observing them from a distance, smoking cigarettes. "Think, why would they feed us? We are the enemy. The radio told us for years what they would do. They mean to humiliate us, to sicken us. This is probably made from floor sweepings, or worse." Her words are poison, tapping into a deep well of fear, cultivated by years of Goebbels' propaganda. The stories of American degeneracy, of their lack of culture, of their supposed barbarism. It was the bedrock of their worldview. And now, that worldview was being challenged by a simple can of meat. Ilse looks from Gretel's pinched, distrustful face to the can in her hand. The hunger is a physical thing now, a clawing beast inside her. It makes her dizzy. She remembers the last real meal she had, a thin slice of pork and a boiled potato, weeks ago, before her unit was forced to retreat. Since then, it had been a slow, grinding starvation. Watery soup that tasted of nothing, bread that was hard as a rock and filled with extender. Her body craves sustenance. It screams for it. She turns the can over. It has a small key attached to the bottom, designed to peel back a thin metal strip around the circumference. It is a clever, efficient design. It is American. What choice do we have, Gretel? Ilse's voice is quiet but firm. To starve? We are already starving. If they wanted to kill us, a bullet would be faster. Why go to all this trouble? She begins to work the small key, her cold, numbed fingers fumbling with the mechanism. The metal strip makes a high-pitched, zinging sound as it peels away from the can. The other women nearby fall silent, watching her. Even Gretel leans in, her skepticism warring with a primal curiosity. With a final twist, the lid comes free. Ilse tilts the can, and a block of reddish-pink, jelly-coated meat slides onto the lid, which she has placed on her lap. The smell hits her first. It is not the familiar smell of German sausage or smoked ham. It is foreign, intensely savory, salty, and undeniably meaty. It smells rich. It smells of fat and protein, and things her body has forgotten. The sight is strange. The meat is shredded and pressed into a perfect rectangle, marbled with pearlescent flecks of fat. It looks artificial, machine-made. It is nothing like the food from a German butcher shop. It is a product of a factory, of mass production, of a system so vast and powerful it could produce millions of these identical blocks of nourishment and ship them across an ocean to feed its armies and its prisoners. Private Miller watches from 30 yards away, leaning on his rifle. He's eaten more corned beef hash than he cares to remember. To him, it's just chow, something to fill your gut before the next miserable detail. He can't comprehend the drama unfolding over this simple can of meat. He just sees a bunch of kraut women staring at their food as if it might explode. Ilse breaks off a small piece with her fingers. It is soft, yielding. The gelatinous fat melts slightly against the warmth of her skin. She looks at it, a tiny morsel of salvation or damnation. Gretel shakes her head, a silent final warning. The entire enclosure seems to hold its breath. This is more than a meal. It is an act of faith or a foolishness. Ilse closes her eyes for a second, the faces of her family flashing through her mind. She thinks of her mother's kitchen, the smell of roasting meat on a Sunday. A tear escapes and traces a clean path through the grime on her cheek. Then, with a steady hand that surprises even herself, she lifts the small piece of corned beef to her lips.
The world shrinks to the space between her hand and her mouth. For a heartbeat, the piece of meat hovers there, a sacrament of the enemy. The collective gaze of the women around her is a physical weight. Gretel's breath is held, her cynical mask frozen in place. Then Ilse's lips part. She places the morsel on her tongue. It is not what she expects. It is not anything she has ever tasted before. The first sensation is an overwhelming, glorious shock of salt. It's a clean, sharp taste that makes her entire mouth water, a jolt to a system accustomed to bland, starchy subsistence. Then comes the richness of the fat, melting on her tongue, coating it in a savory film that is pure, decadent energy. Finally, the flavor of the beef itself, intense and concentrated, a profound and unmistakable taste of real, honest-to-God meat. Her eyes, which had been squeezed shut in anticipation of something foul or poisonous, fly open. They are wide with disbelief. It's not just food. It is the most intensely flavorful thing she has eaten in years. She chews slowly, reverently, her mind struggling to process the signals her senses are sending. This is not poison. This is not garbage. This is rich, nourishing, powerfully good food. A low sound escapes her throat, a half-sob, half-gasp of pure, unadulterated relief. She looks down at the block of meat in her lap as if seeing it for the first time. It is not a trick. It is a gift. She quickly takes another, larger piece, and this time she eats with a desperate, hungry urgency, the pretense of caution gone, replaced by ravenous need. The spell is broken. Her reaction is the only permission the other women need. A collective sigh of relief and hope sweeps through the group. Hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, they begin to open their own cans. The sound of dozens of keys turning, of metal strips zinging, fills the air. Soon, the enclosure is filled with the quiet, urgent sounds of women eating. They use their fingers, the lids of the cans, anything. They eat the biscuits, slathering them with the rich meat. They devour the small, dense fruit bars. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, they are not just prisoners, not just defeated soldiers, but human beings engaged in the simple, profound act of eating a real meal. Gretel is the last to give in. She watches Ilse, watches the others, her hard face a canvas of conflicting emotions. Her certainty, the bitter armor she has worn for so long, is cracking. Finally, with a frustrated, angry motion, she wrenches open her own can. She sniffs the contents suspiciously, then takes a small, defiant bite. Her body betrays her. Her jaw works, her throat swallows, and then her shoulders slump. The rigid line of her back softens. She doesn't say a word, but she takes another bite, and then another. A single, silent tear rolls down her cheek, and she angrily wipes it away with the back of her hand. The American food has done what Allied bombs and tanks could not. It has broken her. The emotional impact of the meal is far greater than its nutritional value. This single act of provision is a psychological blow more devastating than any battle. Their leaders had told them the Americans were weak, decadent, and running out of resources. They had been assured that the German spirit and racial superiority would triumph over mere material advantage. But this can of corned beef is irrefutable proof of a lie. It speaks of a power so vast, an industrial machine so enormous, that it can afford to feed its millions of prisoners with high-quality protein, a luxury most German civilians hadn't seen in years. The enemy they were taught to despise, to see as subhuman, is not starving them. They are feeding them, and feeding them well. It is an act of generosity so profound and so casual that it defies all their previous understanding of the world. It is not kindness they taste, but power. The sheer, terrifying, incomprehensible power of a nation that can treat meat as a disposable commodity. As the last of the food is eaten, a deep, unnerving quiet settles over the women. The hunger in their stomachs has been sated, but a new, more unsettling hunger has taken its place, a hunger for the truth.
As the last rays of twilight fade into a cold, inky black, the atmosphere within the women's enclosure has fundamentally changed. The frantic energy of starvation has been replaced by a heavy, contemplative stillness. The meal is over. Empty K-ration boxes and gleamingly clean tin cans litter the mud, stark evidence of the strange feast. The women no longer huddle in tight defensive clusters. They sit in looser groups, some lying back on the damp ground, staring up at the starless, overcast sky. The conversation is sparse, muted. The grand ideological certainties that had sustained them through years of war have just been silently, unceremoniously dismantled by a block of processed beef. Ilse sits with her knees drawn to her chest, the salty, fatty aftertaste still lingering on her tongue. It's more than a flavor, it's a presence. It has settled in her stomach like a warm stone, a feeling of satiety so foreign it's almost uncomfortable. She watches Gretel, who has retreated into a stony silence, methodically cleaning the inside of her can with her finger, licking it, refusing to waste a single calorie. But her eyes are distant, looking at something far beyond the barbed wire. The anger is gone, replaced by a deep, weary confusion. The world no longer makes sense. If the Americans were not the monsters of propaganda, if the stories of their cruelty were lies, then what else was a lie? The inevitable victory? The righteousness of their cause? The very foundation of their lives? The questions hang unspoken in the cold night air, too vast and too terrifying to articulate. From his position near the gate, Private Dale Miller notices the change. The noise has died down. Before, there was a constant low hum of anxious chatter, of coughing, of weeping. Now there is an eerie quiet. He sees them through the gloom, not as a faceless enemy collective, but as individuals. He sees a woman carefully folding her empty ration box into a neat square. He sees two others sharing a cigarette one of the guards had tossed over the wire. He sees Ilse staring out into the darkness. He doesn't understand the profound shift that has occurred. To him, it was just evening chow call, but he can feel it. The hard, defiant edge is gone. Something has broken, or perhaps something has been born. Sergeant Davies walks by, pausing to look over the enclosure. "Quiet tonight," he remarks. "Full belly'll do that to you," Miller replies. Davies just grunts.
Yeah, a full belly and a lost war. For Ilsa, the corned beef was not an act of mercy. It was an answer. It was the final, devastating answer to a question she hadn't even dared to ask. The war was not lost on the battlefield, in the rubble of Berlin, or in the skies over the Ruhr. It was lost in the factories of Detroit, the slaughterhouses of Chicago, and the canneries of New Jersey. It was lost to a nation that could project this kind of effortless abundance across an ocean. She picks up her empty can, its edges sharp. In the dim light, the bull's head logo is barely visible. It feels like a symbol of a new, brutal god, a god of industry, of logistics, of overwhelming material power, a god her own nation had tried and failed to appease. The future, which hours ago had been a terrifying void, is now something else. It is a complete and total unknown. Everything she was, everything she believed in, lies in ruins around her, as surely as the bombed-out cities she left behind. The war is over for her. The fight for survival is not, but it will be a different kind of fight, waged not with a rifle, but with the slow, painful acceptance of a new and bewildering reality. She holds the can tightly in her hand, the taste of a foreign world still on her tongue, and waits for the dawn.